Okay, we're live. Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. I'm Chris Garner, joined with my co-host George Aldridge, and today we are talking all things Daredevil. Daredevil Series 2, the hit new Netflix series, was it about 2 weeks ago now? It's taken me a little bit to get through this one. I know with Series 1, I pretty much just binged it beginning to end. You did exactly that. You finished this ages before me.
I was struggling to remember what we've got to say today.
Yeah.
It
We've
wasn't.
got it all written out, but yeah.
It was almost 2 weeks ago. I think I got 7 of them done on the. Actually, how many done? I can't remember. I got it done by Saturday night.
Yeah, no, you were way ahead of me. You was like, have you started? I think I said like, yeah, I've watched the first 2, and you was like, I'm on episode 8, mate. And I was like, oh shit, I got a lot of catching up to do. Finally got it finished yesterday, and we've definitely got a lot to say on it. We're going to split this up into 2 sections as we always do. We're going to have a spoiler-free section first, but the main nitty-gritty of it with all the themes and everything we can talk in depth about will be in a spoiler section, which we'll let you know when we get to it. I'm probably the last guy to see this series, in all honesty, so probably everyone's seen it anyway, but we'll give you that warning when we get to it. So I guess we'll kick off with our thoughts on what we thought of Series 1 when that came out. For me, I was always a big Daredevil fan. He's probably my favourite Marvel character on his own. X-Men's my favourite property, but Daredevil's always been my favourite character. And I swear to God, I'm the only human being on the planet Earth that loves the Ben Affleck movie, the early 2000s one. Yes, it's not a complete faithful adaptation of the character, but I thought he turned in a decent performance. Michael Clark Duncan was awesome as Kingpin, and Colin Farrell was enjoyably hilarious as Bullseye. And I just liked it. And then when Daredevil got the rights back, because I think what it was is that Fox had some kind of deal where if they didn't put out another Daredevil property before a certain point, it would go back to Marvel. And I think that's what happened. I was kind of worried because I'd seen the Marvel movies, I'd seen Avengers and things like that, and thinking that they were going to make Daredevil the same tone as that. And then I watched episode 1 of Series 1, and all my problems with it and fears were just cast aside. Series 1 for me is the best TV show ever made. Perfectly understands the character, dark as hell, violent. Absolutely love it. I cannot pick a single fault in Series 1, in all honesty. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say I remember when they announced the whole Netflix deal, there was like, we're going to have 4 programs, then we're going to have a team up. So it was like, oh, okay, it's like the Avengers, but on Netflix. Okay, that was it. Then I just remember getting excited when I started seeing trailers. It was a bit darker. I didn't realise how adult it would be. The same goes for Jessica Jones. And then it took about 20 minutes until I go, okay, this is a different breed. And I think last year I did what I did this year. I had the weekend off work. Last year I didn't work Fridays. And anyway, I was in on the Saturday, but basically I took the Friday off from college. I went to binge all 13 in a row. However, I won a competition to do a Star Wars celebration thing. So unfortunately, I had to leave halfway through to go to work, start another day off. So I think I got 8 done on the Friday on that. I think I got the final 5 on the Sunday, whereas this year, I've obviously done 2 settings again, but on the Saturday night I finished. However, to me, everyone says, oh, what's the best program ever made? They all say The Wire, Breaking Bad, and all these. I've always said Band of Brothers. Obviously, there's only 1 season. But when I finished when I finished season 1 of Daredevil, to me, that overtook Band of Brothers in my eyes. It was just perfect TV. I like Jessica Jones, but it's nowhere near as good as Daredevil was.
Yeah.
So I love season 1. Kingpin, the best villain Marvel's ever produced.
He's so much fun to do an impression of as well, isn't he? Vincent,
it's just you had likable side characters in Wesley.
Yeah.
It was just a glorious TV show. I'm looking at my TV shelf, and I'm still waiting for a Daredevil Blu-ray because they just haven't done one.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, usually I was thinking they were going to bring it out just before Series 2 came out because that's how DVD releases usually work like that. But I'm still waiting on one. I think it's one of the most pirated shows, isn't it, or something like that? And I understand the reason why, because people really want a copy of it. But yes, so Series 2 was announced. A bit of a longer wait, wasn't it? Because we had Jessica Jones in between, which was still a great series, not quite the level Daredevil. I think he's just naturally more of an interesting character.
Yeah, different characters, different style of show. Like, don't get me wrong, Jessica Jones I thought was very good. Again, the incredible villain, the second best Marvel villain ever. You'll see from Kilgrave, but there was something missing with Jessica Jones. But it's just a completely different type of show. But season 2 wise, I remember when they announced this. I believe there was a convention last year when they just put the Daredevil logo up and they had 3 bullets that got shot into it. Obviously, the big selling point was the fact that Punisher would be in the series. And that was arguably the marketing of the entire season 2 was the Punisher.
And I don't know how good that marketing was, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is an integral part of the series, but we're going to get into it in the review in a minute. I don't know if they completely realise his character to its full potential across the entire series. We'll get into that later, though. But yeah, I remember that when Punisher was announced, I thought, yep, that makes sense. I was thinking they would go like Bullseye or something like that and immediately go, like sort of Batman Begins, you've got the first one, and then you have his main villain in the second one, and that's what I thought they were going to do. They didn't quite do that, though. But all the Daredevil and Punisher stuff, absolutely loving this one. So I guess we'll give our initial impressions on Series 2. Still a fantastic series, still the best TV show on TV, in my opinion, but doesn't quite hit the heights of Series 1, I don't think. There's a lot going on in Series 2, don't get me wrong, but I do think that it feels slightly less focused. And I know I'm completely with you there. And Tom as well tried to make it onto this review because he's a big Daredevil fan as well. He basically pretty much agrees with me that the driving force of the series feels a little weakened because you haven't really got an end goal villain so much. You kind of have, but it's not quite the heights of Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, and I think that does hurt the series overall. But besides that, I think it's still great. The themes they do with the character, the way they take the characters, but it does kind of feel like they had 2 storylines for 2 full seasons, and you sort of hit the midway point in this, and they just kind of mash the 2 together, and it suddenly becomes a different season halfway through.
Yeah, and this was mine. I liked it as much as I did season 1, but I think I said to you even on the day that there's something missing of a villain, and I was like, because they've got the Punisher, that was working. However, not spoiler wise, but that was me on about episode 7 or 8. So the time's working. I'll finish it now. I won't say anything yet until we get to the spoiler section, but I think that it was still fantastic. I think it's as good as Series 1, but in terms of villain, that's what it's always been. Is there wasn't I'd say a present villain, because Kingpin was mentioned at the first episode of Series 1, and the whole season's developing him, and then they have the sort of season finale where they have the confrontations. Whereas Season 2, you have the Punisher, which is great, and then you're right, they kind of get to this zone where 2 storylines kind of get mushed together, and it's a shame because I think it's great still, but they could have maybe carried something over 2 seasons. I don't know, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's hard to slag off because I think this kind of happened with me and you and Hate Play, where we both liked it, but we were criticising it more. And that's with this. It's Season 2. My initial thoughts are it's absolutely great. It's phenomenal. Watch it. But there's just something missing, which is a shame because there's so much going for it.
And I don't know if that's the fault of because the showrunners changed, didn't they? I know Drew Goddard was the series creator. He's acting as consultant on this one. And Stephen S. DeKnight, he was the showrunner of Series 1. He left after this, and then 2 new guys came on. You've got Doug Petrie and Marco Ramirez. And I think they were still great. As we say, I'm not slagging this series off at all, but I did notice a slight change in style a little bit between Series 1 and 2. I don't know if you picked up on that so much, but it felt definitely a little bit different.
Yes and no.
Not vastly, but there was...
Yeah, it wasn't vastly, but I think in terms of the seasonal structure, there was definitely some more obvious changes as such. But again, I think that's the Punisher angle coming into it. I'll be able to talk a lot more about that later on. Obviously, there's talk of a Punisher spin-off show. It could have something to do with that. That's what I think it is. But I think the core element is there. Like Drew Goddard was the executive producer. Again, with the producer credit, you don't really know how much they do. But he did say in an interview that they were consulting him and stuff. I think they kept it true to the Season 1. but then some of it feels like there's a lot they're setting up for season 3, which is
definitely.
It's a good thing, but sometimes if you're hinting too much at a future season, it can let you down. So Batman v Superman recently, like in season 1 of Daredevil, there's maybe 1 or 2 hints to season 2.
It was mostly the stick episode, wasn't it? I think series 1.
There's never anything concrete, whereas this, it's maybe a bit too much of, very introducing the Iron Fist world towards the end. They didn't reference Jessica Jones as much as I thought they would, which again works, just the odd subtle mention, but there was something there where they were looking at the bigger picture. But, I can fault it, but there's a lot going right for it, I'd say. That's my thoughts.
Right, we'll get into it more in depth now then. So we'll sort of go through all the characters now and not give anything away, but just sort of discuss where the characters are at this series. So we'll kick off with the title character, Daredevil. I loved his progression in this series from series 1. And that's not just the characters as well. First off, the costume. Finally, because that was probably my only fault I could pick with Daredevil series 1 was that the costume looked really CW-ish, like from Arrow or Flash. It didn't quite look the part, but in this they explained that was his sort of prototype costume. And this isn't a spoiler because you see it in the trailer, but he gets his new costume, and now he is officially Daredevil in my eyes. The costume is fantastic, the mask, the suit, everything like that. And Charlie Cox as well just plays it just so well all the way through the series. I love how the series kicks off where you're just seeing Daredevil in action. You can clearly see there's been a span of time where he's out on the streets, he's beating up criminals. The opening montage was fantastic. And I don't know whether I'd agree myself on this, because there is definitely a lot more action in this series with Daredevil. There's a lot more hand-to-hand fights, fights with ninjas, fights with Punisher, just everything. But I would say this is also more a Matt Murdock series than Daredevil. There's definitely a lot going on with him, with his personal life in this one, with his relationships and just sort of his moral stance on, does he skirt the line and go into the realm of the Punisher? Is that a better way of dealing with things, or does he stay true to his religion and his mantra of not killing anyone? I thought that was really fascinating. To be honest, this was a better Batman v Superman story than Batman v Superman was in terms of how it deals with the themes between Daredevil and the Punisher.
That's what I was thinking in my head. I thought with this, it's hard to explain. I draw comparisons to Spider-Man 2, The Dark Knight, and The Winter Soldier, where you've had the origin, you've had a really good setup for the future stuff, and then it just kind of goes into it with a bang straight up. Season 2, obviously he starts off as Daredevil. He's, a few little shots of him saving the day. You introduced to Matt Murdock, how his sort of personal life is going as well. They get the balance right, and then when they start hitting the themes of the confrontation with the Punisher, this is just in general, where they take the character, they use the subplots. I'd say just some subplots are a bit too over the top, but some of them naturally work their way in really well, and it benefits to the character that they've put a character story first rather than anything else. And across the 13 episodes, you see that his relationship with Foggy and Karen is great. His sort of conflicts with Punisher is incredible. Some of his Electro moments are really good. So I think with Matt Murdock, they've nailed it. And I think I don't know enough about Daredevil. I've never really read many Daredevil comics. I know you're a big fan.
I haven't actually read any of the comics. I will be honest with that. I'm just familiar with characters.
It's like I kind of see Charlie Cox as Daredevil. Like I've never seen the Ben Affleck one, and I kind of want to, but I won't watch it purely because I know that I've got this Daredevil that I'd rather rewatch. If that makes sense. Like I love Ben Affleck. Don't get me wrong. I think he was the best thing about Batman by a Country Mile, but that's a chat for another time. I think where they took the character, they took it in the right direction, which has benefited the program and any future seasons. Most important thing, I mean, it's so easy to have a sort of sequel show and say, here's a set piece, we'll design a scene around it, whereas this, they sat down, they thought, what's going to benefit the show? Punisher did that greatly. We'll go into it later on. There's some really, really good moments between the two of just their sort of their conversation pieces between each other, that their sort of conflict towards the role as the kind of protagonist / heroes. And I think they take it in the right direction and going back to the costume, which was the first thing he said. It looked great. I mean, I remember the whole of season 1, you're kind of waiting for the costume at the end, and then it was kind of, he looked like a bug. It was so funny.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think it was just sort of how the helmet fit his face. It just really didn't look quite right.
And then in this, they just nailed it. And I like kind of what they do with him, where he's kind of got the guy where he'll like, fix up some of his costume stuff. So I think all in all, the progression of Daredevil was perfect, in all honesty.
And what I like is like we're going to move on to like Punisher, Elektra, Foggy, and Karen, but even all those side characters all sort of like tie back up to Daredevil as a character. Everyone is linked to him. It keeps its focus on him as a character and how he's dealing with all this stuff. And you're right in terms of you compared it to Spider-Man 2, how Matt's having to deal with his personal life against his vigilante lifestyle. And I love that, he's trying to balance relationships, friendships, his law career, as well as fighting crime on the streets at night. And then you throw Elektra into the mix as well, his old flame. I love where middle chapters just throw all this on the character and take them to the most emotionally heightened point, and I think they absolutely did that with the character. So let's get on to Punisher, because he is the big new addition in this. Why am I forgetting his name? John Bernthal, that's it. So I remember the whole casting like hullabaloo when everyone was, I think Tom Hardy's name was thrown out there at some point as well. I remember that.
He said he
was cast. And I remember immediately just being completely on board with him. He was my favourite character in Walking Dead. I'm not completely up to date on Walking Dead. I think I stopped towards the start of Series 3. I think it's on Season 6 now or something. But he was great in that. Loved him in Wolf of Wall Street. And when they cast him, I was like, I can instantly see that. I don't know if there was much sort of backlash from him. I didn't really see all that. But, man, give this guy an Emmy just right now. I know we're not going into spoilers, but there's a scene where he delivers a monologue at a graveyard, and it's emotional. He completely gets invested in the character. He is that character, and they've succeeded in that. They've introduced a brand new character into the Marvel Cinematic Universe through this TV show that I want to see more of. I want to see his story develop. It's a very simple backstory. His wife and 2 children were murdered. He wants revenge. He does it by very extreme methods. And in many respects as well, he's almost the same as Daredevil. He's just a more extreme version. Daredevil doesn't kill people, but he beats them. He wants the justice and the law and the court to deal with it, whereas he wants a more permanent solution. I think he calls Daredevil a half measure in one scene. And if you're going to reference an episode, for me, the best episode of the entire series is probably episode 3, New York's Finest, where you've seen it in the trailers where Daredevil's tied to the chimney, and it's more or less just them two the whole episode just discussing back and forth their different ideologies, and he's just fantastic all the way through. I wanted to see more of him. Towards the finale, they do kind of drop him, but for all the scenes that he was in, he just completely stole the show for me.
And this is what I said. I mean, the hype off this, I've bought like a Punisher t-shirt and everything. I've never seen the other Punisher films. I know a lot of people love him. I've read some of the comics. He is brutal. He's incredible. And John Bernthal. But I remember when they announced the casting, the internet was kind of united for the first time I can ever remember for a comic book film. There was always arguments, bickering. Obviously, Ben Affleck's a famous one. It goes back to Michael Keaton when, even in the 80s, they wrote letters saying how much they hated it. I could not find one person that faulted the casting of this. And he looked great in the trailers, and then when you kind of get his introduction, he is just awesome, and I think he's my favourite thing of the show. Going off the early episodes, you're right. I won't talk about it yet because there's so much I can say about what he does, but straight away after seeing the monologue, I was like, okay, he needs to have an Emmy. Every time he's on screen, you just concentrate that a little bit more, because obviously, it's a Daredevil show. He's a side character, but he's the side character that should have his own show. There's talk of one happening, and it was just intriguing. Go back to the storyline. His family was murdered. He wants revenge. That's the most 2-dimensional character you can ever come across. But he delivers. He makes the 2-dimensional stuff like, I don't want to say incredible, but he makes it like a genuine character.
No, you feel like a real person, and when you see moments where like Karen is feeling sympathy for him, you're right there with her basically, because he does just play it so well, so personal as well.
his story arc is almost a subplot, but it's the kind of the plot you want to get behind the most, rather than the sort of Matt Murdock stuff, which is, you know, it's no criticism of the Daredevil character. He's great, but Punisher just has that gravitas where you're just like mesmerized by everything he does. He's as violent as he needs to be. He's as brutal. You know, I want to give praise not just for John Bernthal, but the writers, because his scenes and the way the characters developed is just great. And I want to see more of him, whether he gets his own show, whether they give him a Netflix film, which no one's talked of, which I thought, or if they were to ever risk him in the cinematic universe as like a one-off cameo for a second or two. Obviously, you can't really do a lot because, you know, he's the most violent guy, and there's a fight scene in the latter half of the series, which is just incredible that involves him. But Punisher's my favourite thing of the season, I can say that for sure. And there will be more of him. Everyone wants more of him. I'm guessing they'll do that. But I think he should be worthy of an Emmy nomination for sure.
I think a Netflix film, because I mean, you suggested that I think yesterday, and I never even thought of that. I think that's a much better way to take the character, because as a character, he is very sort of monotone, keeps himself to himself, doesn't say much, and I can't imagine a whole series revolving around the character. I think he's better served as a supporting character like he was in this. If you are going to do his own thing, I think like an hour and a half to 2 hour film is probably the best way to take it. But I'm sure he's going to get a series, because I don't know if this is a spoiler. It might be, but there was a certain image you sent me, which is like the most hypest image of Punisher you will ever see, and it doesn't make it into the show. So it's definitely a case. And when you get to the last episode of this, you can really tell they definitely filmed a lot more of him, probably for that episode to tie it up more, but chose to take it out. Maybe they're going to use that chunk and put it in his own thing, or they're rewriting it or changing the course of the character, whatever they're going to do. But there's definitely a lot that didn't make it into the show. The next biggest character that introduced, Elektra. We finally get her in it. I was always looking forward to seeing what they were going to do with her character as soon as Series 1 hit. She's an integral part of the Daredevil story. And I'm kind of torn how I feel about her in this. The first one, the costume, I really wasn't digging. That, again, because they got a new costume for Daredevil, that when it gets to it, they completely nail the costume for the Punisher. I really wanted something like that for Elektra, and I didn't quite get the comic book costume that I wanted. And also, I don't know what to make of the actress. I've seen a lot of people praising her. I thought she was good for some scenes, but I didn't think she was very consistent with it. And if I was going to pick a fault between all the cast in it, she would probably be, in my opinion, the weakest link out of everyone. Not to say she's awful, but just when she's up against everyone, I didn't quite have that level of engagement with her as I wanted to.
Yeah, it's weird because I mentioned earlier that I don't know an awful lot about Daredevil, and with Elektra, I only know sort of one key plot point from the comics. I'll talk about that later on, see if it made it into the show or not. But it kind of felt not forced, but there's a subplot we'll get to later with Karen and Matt Murdock, where obviously it's been almost a year now, but I don't remember in the first season there being that kind of love between the two. I was sort of Foggy and Karen were a bit closer in terms of there's going to be a relationship, and that's
there were hints of it there. I think there was like knowing glances and stuff, and towards the end in the last episode, you know, where they like brush each other's like hands or arms. That was about it.
And it's like season 1. The reason I enjoyed it in the sense that in a lot of these shows you get forced love triangle out of nowhere. You see them in a lot of these comic book films. Some of them work, some don't. That's what I liked about Series 1. Where Series 2 kind of just opened up and it felt a bit forced with Karen and Matt, but that's because, you know, Elektra's coming into the frame. They kind of hit in season 1 that, oh yeah, there was the Greek guy you loved, which was really cool at Easter egg last year. And Elektra into, and it was interesting at the start learning about, you know, the character in their past. Again, they use narrative flashbacks really well, just like season 1 did with young Kingpin. And then towards the latter stages of the series, I felt they kind of, I can't talk about it yet, but they do something with her where she basically becomes the MacGuffin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. She becomes really two-dimensional towards the end, I found.
And then in terms of other stuff, I'll be speaking about that a lot later on, because I see where they're heading with the character, stuff like that. But she started off all right, and then I felt that, like, I think it was a good performance, but again, I don't know the character. I couldn't tell if she was meant to be a posh English girl or like...
Yeah, right. I know. Like her accent was all over the place in this. Like I think I picked up There was British, Australian at some point, I think. Then she sounded American in another, then Greek in another. It was all over the place. That's what I could say. That episode you was referring to with the flashbacks, I do think that going back to series 1, as you said, with Kingpin, and this one, there's an episode which uses really good use of paralleling flashbacks, sort of how things used to be compared to how they are now between the two same characters. And that was another one of my favorite episodes. It did take me a while to clock on that it was a flashback. There were a lot of times where, you know, it would seem like a natural progression of the series, and I'd be like, oh, hang on, no, this is so many years ago when he was still in college. But as I said, I don't think she was awful. I like what they're doing with the character, but she does become the MacGuffin towards the end. And I always try and compare Daredevil to Batman because the two are so very similar in themes. I always found that a comment when I first did the trailer reaction says that Frank Miller wrote both for Daredevil and for Batman, and you can definitely see similar themes going on there. So if I was going to compare Elektra to anyone, it would probably be the Selena Kyle character. She has the same kind of dynamic where you don't know where you stand with her. Is she a villain? Is she a good guy? She's sort of like towing the line between the two. So let's get on to Foggy and Karen, and then we'll sort of go into the more technical aspects of it more. So from episode 1 of series 1, I absolutely love Foggy. Brilliant dynamic and friendship with very, very believable friendship as well with Matt Murdock. And Karen, it took me a little while to warm up to her character in series 1, I remember, but I'm going to say it in series 2 when she shares the moments with Matt Murdock and their relationship sort of being taken to the next level. I will say it's the best superhero pairing since like Lois and Clark from the original Superman films. I absolutely loved all their scenes together, and I thought it was a very natural way that their relationship moved throughout series 2.
I think with Foggy's great.
Yeah.
In one, you find out obviously that he's Daredevil, and there was this good dynamic between the two, and that kind of reignites in season 2. And I like where they take it, where you get in the conflict of Matt trying to be Daredevil rather than his sort of daytime job, and that's reflected on Foggy, which sets up a really good character arc for a future season, and B, some events that happen between the two. Whereas with Karen, it's really well done, her relationship with Matt Murdock in this. However, towards the end of it, sees that the Mary Sue phrase, I hate that, but she kind of, if anything, she just becomes too much the center of attention. Just going off a Batman v Superman thing, she kind of ends up getting kidnapped and saves so much, where they make a joke about it towards the end, and I was just there like, okay, that's maybe a bit too far. And I just think, again, towards the end with Karen, it was maybe a bit too much of her rather than what it should have been. The like of the same person being kidnapped loads, but I love the sort of story actually takes with Punisher when she sympathizes with him, like the relationship stuff. But then, you know, I wouldn't say it's a spoiler as such, but she basically becomes a journalist.
Yeah.
So she's become, in series 1, she's basically the receptionist for the lawyer. In series 2, she is basically the lawyer. And at the end of season 2, she's now a journalist. So she just set up to be like Mrs. Perfect. And I hate the Mary Sue phase. I hate the fact that people use that with Daisy Ridley. I forgot his name, but I don't want to reference him. You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that phrase is now stuck in my head for characters like this. And it's a shame because season 1 was just great. And the first 3 quarters over in series 2 is enough. But then it may be just a bit too far. But again, I think, you know, some of her subplots work. Just that final subplot that they have with was just too much, I thought. But Foggy's great though. I mean, everything is in. Series 1, I didn't like him too much. Then you kind of you sort of warm towards him, and then in this you love him even more.
Yeah, the first couple of episodes with Foggy were a little bit hit and miss, but I think I saw an interview like a couple of days ago where he's at a panel. It looks like a Comic-Con style panel, and he says that he had the least amount of time among any of the cast to prepare for the character. So he basically got there and he had to learn on the job, and you can definitely see him get stronger with the character as series 1 goes on. And here he just completely knows the character, and he moves him in a really, really nice, believable way as the friendship slowly starts to break down with Matt. But with Karen, with the whole journalism thing, we saw that setting up in series 1 where she's hanging out with Ben Urich and she's trying to get him to write the story of the Kingpin, his true identity. And I don't know how I stand with this. I remember watching it at the time and thinking it was okay, but looking at how Series 2's moved on, I think it was a huge mistake killing Ben Urich. He's a very, very key character in the whole Daredevil mythos, and he's almost like a sort of Commissioner Gordon to Batman, how integral he is to the story. And his character seems to be replaced by Ben Urich's boss in this series, the guy with the beard.
Kind of.
I was just watching it thinking they shouldn't have killed Ben Urich. Ben Urich should be the mentor character, pushing Karen to, finish this story of Frank Castle and the Punisher.
Yeah, it kind of comes where Ben was great in season 1. Obviously, I've read the comics, but when they killed him, I, with the world, was devastated. That was such a horrific episode, and it kind of feels like his boss is in it. It feels like the boss and Karen kind of both absorb his character.
Yeah.
I think killing him worked well for series 1, but again, I don't know the source material well enough, but I just felt that it was a bit too forced this season to sort of journalist angle, whereas the boss kind of would come in and do his thing and then go, but she was there and you kind of felt like you needed that middle ground of familiarity between the two, which would have worked if Ben was still alive. It's a tough one because that's kind of my only minor thing, which is where they took Karen. But I'd love to see more of Ben. It's just a shame. Man.
If you did have a Ben Urich, though, now I'm thinking about it, it would have been another character in the mix, and there's already so much going on in the series and new characters that they had to juggle, so I don't know if that would have bogged it down. It's just that I felt that the boss character, he had a complete personality transplant this series. At series 1, he was an absolute dick, and then all of a sudden in this one, it's like since Ben's died, he's just completely changed. He's on board with everything. So it's not a huge problem. It still works for the story, but I think that it may have worked better if Ben had carried on into series 2. But then again, he would just be sort of dicking around writing stories, and he basically did that in series 1. So I don't know how much progression you could have got out of that. Okay, so we'll get into the technical aspects now. So we need to talk about the action, because this series definitely has a lot more than series 1. And again, I'm not going to give it away too much, but there is another almost one-shot action sequence. They definitely ramp it up in this one more so than series 1, and it's great to watch. You get some really nice cinematography in the fights, and it's just awesome seeing Daredevil kick ass. I'm sorry, it is. He's trained in martial arts, he's a ninja, and he's fighting other ninjas, and it's just great to watch all the way through. And it's not just that action as well, just like there's a scene involving a boat later on, and I'm just watching it thinking like, this is a Netflix series. This almost looks like a movie. It's so awesome, the stuff they do in this series and how vast it feels like with the action set pieces.
Yeah, the action in this is outstanding. I can't think of any TV shows. I mean, when people look at stunts, they always talk about Arrow, which I like, but I don't really see the stunts as much. And it's so hard to do action on a TV budget. Game of Thrones pulls off, but that's probably the biggest budget in TV history at this rate. Band of Brothers, which I mentioned earlier, that was a film budget. That was incredible. Whereas with this, it's just the choreography of the fight scenes themselves. I mean, the boat was probably one of the major set pieces of the entire season, but if you look at the individual fights, there's a flight of stairs, there's a prison fight, and they're low budget, but because it's like the raid, they're choreographed so well that you don't need a budget to have a fight. You just need to shoot it well and have, the stunts people doing their job well. And that's what I love about it. Again, they've just benefited from it, and each fight works to the character's stunts. Even in some of the Electra sort of Matt Murdock moments, the kind of ninja-y stuff that comes toward the end are pretty cool. The way they're edited and shot, the sort of the listening, because at times you forget that Matt's blind, and what they develop in this series with him, they take that to they finally find a fault with him, because half the time I sit there thinking, there goes, okay, he's blind, but we all really know he's not, because it's they sort of develop that, which is one of the very strong plot moments, I thought. But the action's probably better than most films you get these days as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought up the raid as well, because I was going to draw a comparison to that as well. I can't even entertain the idea of how long it would take to learn all the choreographed moves in this. It's so awesome, and it is shot well. It's not all shaky cam. You can see perfectly everything that's going on. It's brutal, it's violent. You feel the impact between, of all the punches and kicks, just everything like that. It's really great. They all have different fighting styles. So there's a lot to talk about in spoilers that we haven't even got to yet. So we'll just sort of cap this off with a positive and a negative. Your biggest positive, your biggest negative, and overall opinions. Then we'll jump into the spoilers. So do you have any positive or negative that we haven't spoke about so far, or just what you thought was the best thing in the series?
I've kind of covered the majority of the spoiler-free positives. I'd say that Punisher's the best thing about the show. Negative sounds very nasty, but it's just that Karen subplot and the sort of narrative going after episode 8 or 9-ish. But again, it's like faulting something like this is solid because it's still sort of 10 out of 10, a 5-star show.
Yeah.
Its faults is better than 99% of TV today. So that's basically my overall opinion. It's one of the best shows out there, and you should watch it. And I just don't know why they don't do them on Blu-ray. I want it so much. I've got like all my Marvel, films and stuff. They do House of Cards on Blu-ray. Just release the Daredevil ones because I don't want to have to reactivate Netflix to watch them again. My month finishes on Tuesday, but it was worth the binge.
Well, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter, are they on Netflix?
Agent Carter saw season 1 was all right. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I saw 8 episodes, and everyone says it's good. I can appreciate that. However, I don't have time to sit through 15 bad episodes to get to the few good ones. Apparently there is an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reference in this. The Hand of Dogs, the biker crew, apparently in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I didn't know. Minor spoiler, they're not going to be in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore.
Yeah. So positive, negative for me. I'll sort of echo what you said. Punisher was fantastic, and I loved the direction they took the Matt Murdock character. I think they really fleshed him out this series. Negative, it is kind of how the narrative ultimately plays out. It feels like you have a season finale midway through the series, and then it suddenly becomes a different series, and you have to almost start from the ground level and work your way up again. Not a huge problem because I do think it all sort of vaguely ties together at the end, but I did think there wasn't as much of a narrative flow as there was in series 1. Still a great series though, absolutely, as you said, 5-star show, 10 out of 10. Best thing on TV currently. This is overtook Game of Thrones for me. I love everything Daredevil, and I really want series 3 like next year, but I think we're going to get, is it Iron Fist or Luke Cage or something's out next year, maybe Jessica Jones series 2, so it's going to be a long wait, I think, next.
Luke Cage September 30th. Then Iron Fist, I'm assuming, because they've started filming and casting, I'm assuming that's going to take the March slot. Then supposedly we're getting the Defenders, because they've already said Jessica Jones season 2 will come after the Defenders. Whether or not Netflix want to do 3 seasons a year, because let's be honest, it's not hard to binge 3 seasons of TV a year. It's great TV. But even if they don't do a Daredevil season 3 next year, they're doing the Defenders, which I think they might do next November time, because they kind of have like a spring and a winter slot. Then obviously he'll be in that. But again, I don't want to wait. I want them to do 1 season a year, and I think they could do it.
And especially how the series ends on the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I kind of want to see a series deal with that rather than a few shots of him in Defenders.
Yeah, definitely. But hopefully we also get a Punisher's TV show or a film, which I think they will do. We'll be talking about it way more in the spoilers.
I don't know if they'll ever cross over the TV stuff. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. We were going to sort of end it where we think it's going to lead, but I don't know whether we're ever going to get to a stage where they're going to cross over the stuff from the TV show, like characters and stuff, into the film ones. But I know that I remember playing the old PS2 Spider-Man games, and Daredevil was always a key character in it. I would love to see Daredevil meet up with Spider-Man at some point, but they are 2 very different characters. Especially how they've been portrayed in these 2 films from what we've seen of him in the clip from Civil War. I'm sure the film's going to pretty much follow suit of that kind of tone. I don't know if it'd work, but it'd be really neat to see Charlie Cox make his way into the main movie cinematic universe.
I think the best chance, just going quickly now, is obviously Spider-Man set in New York, Hell's Kitchen set in New York. Their best shot is of the Spider-Man films. You could have Kingpin is a renowned. He's a bigger Spider-Man villain to me than is Daredevil. Obviously, we don't know what they're going to do with them. Tom Holland's like 15. There's a lot of potential to do in the future, but it'd be very cool if we could have references as a minimum, not like in your face reference, but they could just, there's a Luke Cage reference in Daredevil where it goes, oh yeah, I know the other guy, the big guy, something like that. They could easily reference that. Maybe even in Civil War we might get something. I doubt we would. They could reference them. Certainly Punisher's probably going to get referenced, I think.
Yeah.
But for the future, there's a lot they can do. It'll be interesting to see if the Defenders is out by the time Infinity War comes out. However, I'm not going to get my hopes up. And it's kind of cool to see the TV stay away from the films, because you then know that you don't have to sort of watch everything in tangent. I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's designed where you can watch it before the Avenger films and it teases them, but you don't have to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I prefer stuff like that because it can get in your face way too much. And that's what I liked about Daredevil, just, away from everything else. Something to clean your head out and not have to watch 8 films before.
Yeah, definitely. They are like sort of side movies. Like we keep saying, like 13 hours. It does feel like a 13-hour movie how it all plays out. But anyway, that'll do it for our spoiler-free section. So now we're going to get into the main nitty-gritty of it. Now we're going to move into spoilers, talk about some of our favorite scenes and sort of how the characters develop and things like that. So I guess we need to start off with the main narrative thrust of this series, which is Daredevil versus Punisher. So just everything with those two was amazing, and I love how it developed. So I referenced it earlier, but so we start off with Frank Castle, who's just killing all the Irish gangs, and that was just awesome to see. I think it was a great introduction to the character where you don't see him immediately, you just see what he's capable of. And from the off, you kind of get a fight towards the end of the episode where Daredevil takes on the Punisher. And I remember seeing a review on YouTube of a guy who said that Punisher beating Daredevil in a fist fight is complete bullshit, because ultimately Punisher is just a soldier. He's good in hand-to-hand combat, but he's no Daredevil who's been trained up with ninjas and stuff. But I thought that really showed the stakes of it, especially when you end the episode where Punisher shoots Daredevil in the head. I thought that was fantastic. And then ultimately, as I said, in episode 3, where the two just sit and talk. And it might be a bit on the nose where you just sort of have one character frozen in one position and they're just talking at each other. But I thought that the writing was so good, the ideology between the two was so good that you are kind of just glued to the screen, especially when it culminates when Punisher duct tapes the gun to Daredevil's hand and forces him to make a decision. That was awesome.
Yeah, the conflict between those two is, we've got Batman v Superman, we've got Civil War, but the quiet background one has been Daredevil v Punisher, and no one said a word, but that's going to be the best conflict of the year, I think, out of everything we're going to get superhero-wise. I didn't expect them to fight in the opening episode, but it was so cool when it happened, and it was a great fight. I believe that they stuck to the comics. There's a lot of panels people have put out, and what it leads into, him shooting him in the head at point-blank range, I thought was great. And then I don't know what episodes Frank Castle gets caught. I think it might be the end of 4.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But the way they set up episode 3, the rooftop scene, has one of my favourite moments of TV history, which is when he opens the door and it's the veteran. And then you see Frank Castle, not only have they already discussed all their ideologies together, but he's kind of like, say there's the door there, he's just like holding the gun on the side of it because, as much as this guy's a vet, he's still going to shoot the guy if he has to, which I thought was great. And you kind of see the pain in him not wanting to kill this guy, but he's going to do it. He almost does it. But where they take those two, I thought was great. And the whole chaining up of the rooftop, duct taping the gun to him, trying to make him shoot the one. I believe that when they do have a fight scene, Daredevil still has the gun duct taped in his hand that he can't pull the trigger with. So he's almost handicapped in it. And I just thought it was absolutely incredible the way they handle those two. And even in the later episodes, when they do get rid of Frank Castle for a few episodes, they bring him back. They kind of have one more meeting where they're conflicting their ideologies again. And I think it's just fascinating. Whenever they're on screen together, it's just something where you just have to pay attention, because it's been written so well. And there's so much credit to the showrunners and both the actors. There's amazing chemistry there. But in terms of their conflict, it was just great. I loved it, especially when I think episode 4, when the Irish gangsters
torturing him.
He's torturing him. It's absolutely painful to watch, and you kind of shudder when they're drilling the hole into his foot, and then when Daredevil comes in, Punisher's trying to kill them all, but he's kind of like stopping him from doing the killing Daredevil is, and just their
It's almost like that scene in Dark Knight Rises where Batman's fighting with Catwoman and she's about to
no
do something like, no guns, no killing.
Yeah, but this was done better, if you know what I mean, in the sense the Catwoman, she's a killer, but she's not like the Punisher's level of killer. I loved absolutely everything about Punisher in this entire season. I mean, there's going to be more to say later. Obviously, we'll be doing Frank Castle versus the people in the endings, but I've got so much credit for them just to come out and say, okay, we're basically doing Punisher v Daredevil, and then to actually be half the series, that's where some of the problem lies. But I think, in all honesty, if you'd have dragged out that conflict over 13 episodes, it might have been a lot harder. But I love the fact they just, rather than tediously introduce Punisher, we're all waiting for him, they just go ahead and put them in straight away, and that works to everyone's favour.
Well, that's what I was thinking. What you just mentioned about if he'd have just been the one character all the way through, he could, because he's not really a villain, is he? So much, he's an anti-hero. So you would never have had that proper villain sort of thing. You would have had an end goal character to get to. But I do agree with that if you'd have just had him fully for the 13 episodes, then it would have felt very repetitive. I think if every other episode you've just got the two chatting with each other about the same thing, just worded slightly differently. They get into another fight, because it did get to that stage for me where it was like episode 1 they have a fight, episode 2 they have a fight, 3 they have a fight, and I was thinking, oh, if they're going to keep up this, it's just going to lose all momentum. But he does sort of drift in and out, not just as the Punisher, but as Frank Castle as well. So I think that was probably the best way to do it. And just going back to that scene where he's forcing Daredevil to shoot, the scene where like Matt Murdock's like he's like straining against the chains to try and desperately get out and stop him. And John Bernthal in that scene is intense as hell, because he has the quiet moments like the scene you just mentioned with the gun with the vet. But we've seen this in loads of films where someone's like holding the gun to someone and he says like, I'm going to give you to the count of whatever. But Bernthal just in that scene is just intense as hell. The first 2 episodes set up Grotto as this, he's not a good guy, but he's vaguely likable and you're on his side. And then when Punisher gives that information that he killed that old woman, even as a viewer, you're like, oh, you know what, just shoot this guy because he deserves it. And I like how, as a viewer, you are sort of in their shoes as well. And later on as well, really, I like this whole theme because it's not just the character of Punisher, but you've also got it with Elektra as well, where she's really extreme and you've got Matt Murdock trying to convince her not to do it. But there's also one of my favourite scenes in it. I can't remember what episode it is. It's where Matt's talking with Karen and she basically says that, I kind of agree with his methods. It's a permanent solution. And I still don't think that Matt Murdock knows that she was the one who killed Wesley. She's been in that situation before where she has put someone down, shot them in cold blood. And it's that moment, which I think that's the point you can pinpoint where their relationship breaks down, where they are just completely on opposite sides. Because everything was going great up to that point. Their date was brilliant. They had real chemistry together. And then it's ultimately where she says that, where Matt Murdock knows that something's up. So you've really got 3 characters he's dealing with that all think the same thing, and then he himself is wrestling with it. Does he just join their ideology, or does he stay true to who he is?
Yeah, and that sets up the true conflict of the entire thing. But with the Karen stuff, it was that moment when she kind of says she agrees with Punisher. It's, you know, he's like dead inside when she says that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I liked it, and I think it's for the audience. I think the way they do it is, you at home, do you agree with the Punisher or Daredevil? That's what I think the season makes a lot of effort into telling us. Elektra, she just kind of kills people. She's been trained to kill. Again, to what you mentioned, she's a bit two-dimensional. It's just like, you're not really bothered. I mean, there's that kid, and you know she's going to like kill the kid the second she sees this one. Obviously, I don't know the character like that in the comics or not, but I was kind of just bored of her angle. And when it goes into the love triangle, I wasn't really clear if they're setting up a love triangle in favour of Elektra being in the show and doing it for the sake of it, or if they're doing it because they genuinely care about the future relationship between Matt and Karen. It wasn't quite clear what they're doing with the love triangle, because the way they shoehorn Elektra in the end of the episode where she kisses Karen, he kisses Karen, it just felt very forced. And then suddenly the subplots begin off there with Elektra, whereas they could have introduced her differently, they could have done something different with it. But I think the whole Elektra role is bigging up season 3. I think they've kind of aimed at that from the entirety of it. Obviously, it's not yet, but we're in the spoiler section. When she dies, they kind of wrap her in the red, which looks very much like her iconic costume.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I kind of thought, okay, they're clearly planning the season 3 stuff with Elektra as a villain, or in general to be consistent in it. But I just felt her season 2 story, I felt very sort of forced.
Yeah, well, I'll come to a death scene later on, because that's one of my concerns for going into series 3, if they're going to introduce another villain, who I hope they really do introduce. But the love triangle, I didn't have too much of a problem with. It's very difficult with love triangles. I mean, I've seen a lot of TV shows. Lost, for one, was one of my favorite TV shows, and that seemed to do a love triangle every other episode. I think if it's done well, it can work. And immediately, I mean, when the trailers came out and they teased the Elektra bit where he comes home into his apartment after the date and immediately sees her, you knew she was going to shake things up. And ultimately, I don't know if the whole breakdown of the relationship between him and Karen ultimately came from her. I know she was definitely a deciding factor where he had to keep going out with her every night to, stop the hand and the Yakuza and all that stuff. But I think that it was more in their ideology as well. There was a lot of contributing factors, but I did think that the love triangle worked. There was that one scene, and it's the go-to one, where Karen comes back into the apartment and sees Elektra in the bed. And then there's that whole moment where it's, misidentified and she leaves. That I could have done without that, to be honest, but I thought that it played out fine, ultimately.
With that, it was so frustrating because, she's walked in, she's seen Elektra in the bed, but there's a blind guy there she's never met as well. It's fairly there's more to it, just, him being in bed with her. And it just felt like, okay, they're going to split up. They're going to split up. Okay, that's how they've handled that. Okay, then. I just wasn't sold on it as such, but that might just be me. But again, I just think the whole of that relationship is just setting up a season 3 thing, which I'm guessing they're going to run with.
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, I mean, as I said, I haven't read any Daredevil comic book. I'm aware of some of the characters and some of the storylines, but in all honesty, I thought that Karen wasn't going to make it to the end of this series. I thought, out of all the characters, she was going to be the one to go. That we're going to reconcile, then she was going to be killed, and then that sets up Daredevil in a really broken place going into series 3. Because I don't know if Spider-Man 2 didn't kill anyone off, but it was the whole thing where you can't escape this lifestyle once you commit to it. So there are going to be it's like Dark Knight, where Rachel dies. It's the one thing that they're holding on to as part of a normal life, but ultimately they can't have it if they choose this vigilante lifestyle. So I didn't think she was going to make it, but ultimately they flip that and they go with Elektra. So what else can we talk about? Oh yeah, go on. Sorry.
Well, it kind of goes into the next bit, Matt and Foggy. I was going to say that what you're saying about the Dark Knight, with obviously Rachel dying and that sort of stuff, you kind of see that in this, except it's his work life. Him and Foggy kind of splitting up and going their separate ways at the end of the season. I really liked that.
Yeah, same.
I think because I was naturally drawn towards Foggy more than I am to Karen, and I thought that impact was okay. Nelson and Murdoch is no more. It was, to me, that was a big deal, especially when you go off the court case of Frank Castle when Matt didn't show up. You kind of it makes you dislike Matt a bit, but then you like Foggy so much more because he's done such a good job of what he could do. And I like the dynamic where Matt can't work, so he's screwing over Foggy, who's just he's trying his hardest, and he still cares for Matt, but he does know what's best, and Matt kind of agrees with him. So I think it's fascinating for season 3 to see what they do with Foggy and Nelson both split, and the sort of looming Kingpin threat, which you got teased as well.
And I like how the series 1 did this brilliantly as well, how it bookends certain plot threads. So in the first one, I think Karen mentions something like, what are you, a couple of good Samaritans? I think she says to them when she first meets them, when she's looking for a lawyer to help her out. And then at the end of the series, you've got Kingpin, who gives the story in the back of the SWAT van about the story of the Good Samaritan. And in this, it's really one of the themes is where they're in Josie's bar at the start, they're all having fun, they're all closing it together. And then you mirror that by the end where Matt's not there and they're in Josie's, and he says, that tab that we've got, we're going to pay up now, it's over. They're all going their separate ways. It's the end of Nelson and Murdoch. And it was really sad because you saw how that flashback in series 1, that episode there where you see them building it when they're still at university, they're still at college. and ultimately how it's all broke down. So Series 3, I think, is going to be an interesting start point because they are all going to be at a weird kilt with each other, not just how it ended between Daredevil and Karen, where she now knows that he is Daredevil, but just building up the friendship again. Maybe they're going to find an understanding now. She's going to convince him not to do it. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself with that, but I did think it was really nice how they did take it there. And ultimately, at the end, it's almost like where Spider-Man 3 ends, where it's a bittersweet ending. Like, there's an understanding between everyone, but it's not a clear cut. They're all back together. And I like that they kept it at that and didn't just, give us a happy, lovey-dovey ending at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to do in a sort of, everyone says in a sequel you go darker. Naturally, you would say, yeah, you do go darker. However, you have to put the story first, and naturally in this type of genre, in the blockbuster films, to progress a story, it just does have to go darker, and generally you have to up the stakes, you have to up the confrontation, you have to create conflicts between the characters, and something has to happen, and they handle this perfectly. Except Elektra, they don't kill any of the main three, and I never really thought Karen would die. I know you were kind of thinking it, but it would have made sense for someone to die, but the person I've seen die is, the company that they've set up together. And I think they handled the sort of the non-Daredevil stuff perfectly with Matt and Foggy.
That was some of the most interesting stuff for me, in all honesty. Like, it's always fun to see Daredevil kick ass, and he absolutely does that. But as I said, it's also a Matt Murdock series, and I like the stuff he went through in this, especially with the Frank Castle versus the People case, which we just mentioned, where he doesn't show up at court, but that whole stuff where that brings Foggy and Karen into the focus. Usually they were supporting characters, but here they're being really active trying to get this case. That's another character we haven't really mentioned. She's a new supporting character. I really, really hated her character. Found her really two-dimensional. Was the DA.
Yeah.
And the moment where she gets gunned down, I was just over the moon because I hated her character from the beginning, even up until that point. There's a moment where they try and give her a bit of humanity, where she says that she messed up the whole operation during the whole Frank Castle's family murder, but I just didn't care for her character at all. So there was all those moments where they're fighting against her, and every time they were trying to get the comeuppance, I thought that was great. Clancy Brown as well, probably the best bit of that was in the courtroom where she says, can you back up this idea of this one soldier who was happy with Frank's performance or something? I can't even remember it. And he says, well, that soldier was me, or something like that. And it just instantly puts her down. No further questions, Your Honor, sits back down.
Yeah, and the DA, there's something dodgy when she changes the police sting, and then you get more and more details, and you kind of waiting for it to go. And Punisher does that brilliant speech when she comes into the hospital room, and he's like, "I would say like you're fucking dead" or something. And just when they massacre her, it's just great because she's two-dimensional, and you do want her to die. And you can tell from the second introduction shade, I don't think she's in season 1 either.
No, she's not.
And that's the thing, when you introduce new characters like that, you always know something's going to happen, especially when it's in detective. Obviously, DA and obvious one's Harvey Dent. He's got his own history, you know what's going to happen there. But when you shoehorn in these characters, especially when they're in minor roles, there's always more to it. That's why when they introduced the sort of the blacksmith subplot, there's a character which I recognised from The Shawshank Redemption as a guard. He's in the Flash as a general. I was like, why is he here for 1 minute? He's clearly going to be in it again. He's not necessarily a name, but he's too familiar to be in it for 2 minutes. It makes
he always plays a villain. Clancy Brown. He plays a great bad guy, but he's always a villain in everything I've seen him in.
Hail Caesar, he's in that. He's great in that for a few minutes. I hate the Coen Brothers though. But if we go into the trial itself was great. I mean, there's, say, 2 episodes of build-up to it, but when they're in the trial stuff, it is absolutely fascinating. It's so hard to make sort of court cases interesting. I know there's an O.J. Simpson TV show that's happening at the minute with that court case. Obviously, it's different to Daredevil, but that's clearly made something interesting, which is clicked. And with this, I just wanted more. I wanted to see more of what he does. And the whole case, they're like, okay, you're going to have PTSD. He's like, no, I'm not, because I'm fine. And then you think he's going to get off lightly, everything's swaying in his direction, and then he's kind of there. He's like, I'm not emotionally distressed. Everyone I've killed, I've done it because I'm going to kill them. I wanted to kill them. And it's just these brilliant few lines where he's just clearly off his head. he didn't care that he's going down because, you know, he's being genuine. And I love the fact that they build up Foggy to do so well. There's 2 episodes of Foggy. Okay, you do a really good job, Foggy, in the court case. And then, you know, Frank Castle just goes out there and says, forget it. And that plays well into it. Obviously, Foggy past that gets his job at the Jessica Jones attorney place, which maybe mean he's in Jessica Jones season 2. You never know. It could be a cool little cameo if they do it.
Well, that's what I was thinking when they did that scene at the end. I mean, there'd been a few Jessica Jones references all the way through here and there. I know Tom hated that, by the way. Like, before he was on the recording, he says that he hates all the references. He'd rather it just be a self-contained thing. Usually I'm like that, but with these 2 shows, I'm completely...
They're not in your face. Like, they reference Luke Cage in a one-off line. If anything, Jessica Jones is more obvious because they get the doctrine from Daredevil that specifically references Daredevil. Whereas in this, you have a one-off throw line, and the lawyer made sense because if you're going to say Foggy's got a job at a very good lawyer's place, you might as well use an established lawyer from the other series that they will have to cross over with. And it's not in your face either. They don't have her in like 4 episodes watching. They just kind of have them at a meal together and she goes, okay, you're with us now. And I thought it was a really cool little cameo. And again, they didn't have Jessica Jones cameo. They just had a minor character from that show channel. But I get what Tom means with the sort of crossover stuff. It can be irritating, but I think the Netflix shows have handled it well again. Almost no references to the Avengers. Just the newspaper bulletins on the wall, which were in season 1. Nothing more to it.
I think they mentioned the incident again, like in really passing in 1 episode.
Yeah, I think that could be the Ultron internet stuff, but again, it's not in your face. There, you don't have to see anything else to take note of what they do say in that.
Yeah, and honestly, when Carrie Ann Moston, who plays Trinity in The Matrix, when she showed up at the diner, that was one of the biggest surprises for me. It's not the biggest surprise. That's the next point we're going to talk about after this. But no, I loved her character. I love her as an actress. But one of my problems within Jessica Jones was that I don't think they did enough with her character. She was very throwaway, especially for that actress, because I know that actress can act. She was in Memento as well. She's fantastic in that movie. But hopefully, if like Foggy does cross over into Daredevil as well, maybe she can come into that as well and do a bit more. We're going to have to see how it all pans out with Defenders and Jessica Jones Series 2. But right, now we're going to get on to my biggest surprise of Series 2. I knew it was going to happen at some point, but I thought it was going to be probably like in the last scene or something to set up for Series 3. But I think it's like episode 8 or 9. Kingpin is back. And it was that moment, I think it was the end of the episode, where Punisher walks into the courtyard in the prison, and you just see someone benching something, and he's bald, and I was like, oh my God, they're doing Kingpin again. And it goes into the next episode as well, but it was so awesome seeing Vincent D'Onofrio back, and he gets, without doubt, some of my favourite scenes in this whole series.
Yeah.
The confrontation with Matt Murdock, in the interrogation room was amazing. And I'm wondering, because how it ends where he's got his lip cut, I'm wondering if he's clocked on that he's Daredevil, or he's beginning to. And that's going to be really interesting, because Kingpin's going to be back as probably one of the biggest villains in Series 3. He's basically made that threat at the end to when Matt Murdock references Vanessa, who we don't see in this series. I was expecting to see her where she was. But I cannot wait. That set it up perfectly for Series 3. And I really hope that he gets a hired hitter in to help out with the situation, which I'm fingers crossed is going to be Bullseye. But he was awesome. Great seeing him back.
That's when that episode happened. I think I messaged you straight away. I didn't spoil it. Obviously, it's like I think that was when I said, "What episode are you on?"
Yeah,
because it was so cool. And then when you see the following episode where they give, and again, they're so good at their flashbacks, and they kind of have Kingpin's rise to power. Then the Punisher comes in and finishes the job, and it was just so good seeing him back. Obviously, unfortunately, Wesley's not here anymore.
I was going to say, it makes sense they've killed Wesley, but he was one of my favourite characters.
He was so likeable. He shouldn't be great. But when they I was really hoping Kingpin being it, but I didn't know if he would. That there was no set leaks or rumours or anything like that. Obviously, with interior scenes, no one would know except the cast and crew. And when they gave the reviews out, they ended up watched 7 of them because he comes in episode 8. So fair play for Marvel or Netflix, whichever one did that. But he's just great. Every line he's in, when he's with Punisher discussing everything, then he kind of betrays him. You get the amazing corridor fight scene in the prison. And then with the Matt Murdock stuff surprised me because I didn't think it would happen those two would meet, and then I didn't expect him to beat the shit into Matt Murdock either.
Where he snaps the handcuffs. It's just
Yeah, but
so
it's like season 3's teed up, I think, for Kingpin to be the main villain behind the bars, and you're right with the bullseye stuff. Whether they want to go with him or they'll do some Elektra stuff, or maybe even both. I don't know if they would. You could probably get away with putting one of them in if you remove the Punisher from the Daredevil equation, if that makes sense.
yeah.
But what he said, I'm going to go after you and Foggy, that's, to me, set up the Series 3 dynamic really well, especially as it finishes with them being separate. So Matt's going to obviously have to be a lot safer around Foggy, but it was so cool just seeing it. And they used him perfectly. It wasn't the last episode. It was kind of that 3/4 way in to take your mind off the Frank Castle court case, setting up the Punisher's final arc, the way he just lets him escape prison. I thought it was really well handled. And I want to see more because Kingpin's just great, and he's too good not to include in this series.
Yeah, he's scary as hell. Like, even though he's behind bars, like, already he's working his way up the ranks. He's already top dog basically by the end of that episode. So I would kind of like to see him get out, in all honesty, in Series 3. Like, have him in jail for the most part, but I would like to see him break out again. But I mean, if as long as he's in Series 3 a lot and we get more of these interrogation things, I'd be completely fine with that because he was great. Right then, so it kind of gets to that point, and then it becomes a very, very different series from here on in. We kind of move into the whole hand stuff. So you've got Stick coming back, Nobu. That was a great reveal, by the way, seeing Nobu come back. He's got all the burnt up face from the episode from Series 1. But this, to me, is where the series really slowed down. And maybe it's because I just don't really care about the hand stuff all that much. It's just Daredevil against ninjas. I don't really know much about the hand, in all honesty, from the comic books. I've heard them mentioned a lot. I know they're a big integral thing in the Daredevil story, but I just really didn't care. And it goes on for so long. It feels like they're really treading water between episodes. Like, about 3 episodes will go by and you'll think, well, what has actually been achieved? And I don't know if it's because they didn't explain it all that well. There is a scene where Stick sits Matt down, and it's one of the most boring, over exposition scenes I've seen in a long time, to the point where I had to watch it back about 3 times and I still don't fully understand it. He says something about them were warlords and they killed Stick's mom, and then Stick took the dagger out of his mom and fought with it, and then the Black Sky, and I don't think they really explain what the Black Sky is. When I rewatch Series 1 and there's that kid that they go after, I think it's episode 7 in the Stick one, they mentioned Black Sky in that, and now I thought that was like a comic book character or something, or maybe it was a tie-in for Inhumans if they have this certain power, because how they talk about them, it's almost like they're a mutant or something from X-Men. But it's never really explained in that. I thought it would be in this. But really all you get is that Black Skies are meant to be immensely powerful, and that's it. You don't really understand why. And then as it pans out, Elektra is the Black Sky, or is a Black Sky. I think there's quite a few of them, but I didn't really get the significance of that. So what does that mean? She's going to be working for the Hand. That's it.
Yeah, it was. When the trailers were coming out, the first one was the Punisher trailer, which was great. The second one was the Elektra trailer. It kept all the hand stuff quiet. And then I remember seeing that Elektra trailer, and I was there like, oh, okay, they've suddenly got another evil army that's come in at the last minute, which no one knew about.
Yeah.
That's where I was a bit like, oh, okay. And then when they kind of happened, it was just so boring as a subplot. And I wasn't clear what they're trying to do, because they cast Finn Jones as Iron Fist, but I'm convinced, and I was Googling it, there's a sort of accountant that says, oh, they've kidnapped my son. That son is Iron Fist. I'm guessing, because he said the name Danny when he finds the son, and Iron Fist is apparently called Danny when I was doing some research, because again, I don't know a lot about him. And I thought last year, when they had the sort of hinting at the Japanese, I thought that was just an Iron Fist reference, which it was. I had no idea they'd be integral to season 2 of this. And I felt that when they started introducing all the chambers, and he also looks a lot like Finn Jones, the person.
Yeah, he does. Same kind of hair, yeah.
Yeah, so I was there like, I'm not sure if this is meant to be the Iron Fist who then go off and get a show next year, or if it's just the Hand's villainous deeds.
And age massively between series, apparently.
Well, exactly. It wasn't clear, like, I thought they'd have cast maybe Finn Jones. If they're going to have him in, then he'd have been in them scenes. It just wasn't really clear, and I was so bored by this stuff in the anime, which is a shame because I loved everything else. I was on the edge of my seat for probably 10 of these episodes, and then it got boring and predictable. And when they said, "Oh, Electra, you're the Black Sky," I was there like, "Okay, can we move on?" Just making her a MacGuffin for the sake of it felt like Man of Steel when Superman is the Codex, whatever the hell that means. Just like, why not you Black Sky? They just say it, and then when she dies, they take her body, they put it in that chamber to resurrect her. The Nobu stuff was great. I liked how they handled him. Very cool. Daredevil just throws him off the building. Has he crossed the line? Has he killed someone? You kind of meant Daredevil doesn't care, he doesn't think anything of it, but obviously you see that Daredevil's not the one that kills him, which was a cool little throwaway, but I was so bored. And the finale, which is such a shame when they scale up the building and they're killing people at the hospital.
It was just to get Claire back in it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like Claire's like, because I think Rosario Dawson, I haven't seen her in a lot, but she's a bigger name than what her role is, and it felt like they were just shoehorning her to be in the series because series 1 it made sense. You know, she was a doctor, she had to help him. The Luke Cage, they go to the end of Jessica Jones, that was a bit okay. They've just got her, but again, it works. She's not a major character. Seems like, is she going to be like the Coulson? Is everyone just going to come to her with their issues or something? But I think towards the end of the finale, I was just a bit tired from it. I just sat there waiting for more and more Punisher stuff, and they were giving us more hand. And the Hand, they should either have their own series as villains or and then Iron Fist. It's not clear what they tried to do with them, which is such a shame. And that's the only subplot. I mean, I mentioned the Karen stuff earlier because to me, the Hand stuff is spoilers. I just don't think it paid off at all, this storyline.
No, absolutely. And there was another character who I kind of had to do a bit of Googling around because I don't know everyone who they tie into, but that guy who Stick goes to in series 1, I think he's called Stone. You see him like just the back of him with the scars.
Yeah, they just forgot about him.
Vaguely in like, I think it's the episode where you get the flashbacks to young Elektra training. You see a bald guy at the very back out of focus in the shot, and I think that's Stone because he's standing there like that. I think that was Stone, but you don't get his character. I thought he was going to be the one in the sarcophagus all along, to be honest, and then he was going to sort of awaken up at the end, but we learned that was basically empty, and they're kidnapping these people, draining them of their blood to put into this sarcophagus. I don't know if it was explained very well.
No, because I thought, okay, there's something in there. I was praying it wasn't going to be something like Doomsday or something when they open it. Because the way it was handled, it cuts to like a city, and I swear there's like a roar or something. I don't know in my head, but then does Elektra end up in this chamber at the end of it? Because it looks like she's ended up in it.
Yeah, so they're pumping her full of blood to bring her back to life. It's whether they're going to like turn her into like Nobu and she's not going to be killable and she'll keep coming back. I don't know. I really don't know. It doesn't explain it.
But I thought they handled her death really well, to be fair. What I mentioned earlier is that I know one Daredevil comic. I know that Bullseye kills Elektra. And I thought the way they handled her death was great because you had the Bilderberg goes, okay, we'll run away together. And
that was a great scene. That was great.
Well done. Like, as much as I dislike that sort of love triangle, their chemistry works really well in that final episode or two. And then I thought when they killed her off, they did it well. I didn't see it coming. Again, I thought that would be saved for a Bullseye or a future series, but they've clearly got a plan with Elektra. I'm guessing as a season 3 antagonist or maybe even the Defenders antagonist. We don't really know what they're going to do with that, but I think the Hand stuff was incredibly weak compared to what we'd had previously. And that's where it kind of lost me in the narratives where they were just suddenly introduced rather than anything else.
Yeah, same here. And I'm really torn on that death scene because on the one hand, I think it was done well and it justified it, and it's a good ending place for the Daredevil character of that series. But to me, that scene's iconic to Bullseye. And I was watching it with my family and they were like, oh, I bet Elektra's going to die. And I'm like, no. Shut up, you, because they're going to do Bullseye Series 3 and that's where they're going to kill her off. But they did it in this, and now that's kind of irritated me because I want to say that's the biggest storyline with Bullseye, like just as the character. So now if they do introduce Bullseye, you can't really recreate that scene because the Daredevil movie with Affleck, say what you want about that scene, but the bit where they kill Elektra in that film, that's almost panel for panel, dialogue for dialogue from the comic book. They do that bit really well. And I wanted to see that done right, like even better in this series. But now they're not going to bring her back, bring Bullseye, and then do another death scene with Elektra, because that just makes no sense at all. So I doubt they are going to do that. They've moved it to this series, and now I'm kind of unsure. Like, I would love to see Bullseye, but there's really no stakes for him now in it. He's just going to be a guy after Daredevil and have no big character moment where he takes out Elektra. I don't know. They're Marvel. They've clearly got a plan, but I wasn't really keen on the death scene because I wanted to see that unfold into Series 3. What else can we talk about? Okay, I want to talk about the Punisher and how he's basically just cast aside in the finale.
I've got my theory on this. Do you want me to go first, or you?
Yeah, you go first, because you were the one who found that picture with the Gatling gun, which was incredible.
When he had the minigun, it wasn't just that picture. When you go onto Netflix, you get like, not an advert as such, but at the top of the page, there's a kind of like a 10-15 second video advertising the newest show. And then Punisher walk out with the minigun, they had Elektra of the Knives, Daredevil being Daredevil. So I remember being pumped before I pressed play on episode 1. And I spent 13 episodes waiting to see him pick up that minigun. Then I think it's episode 12. This is brushing ahead. I will go back to it, but you see the minigun in the room and you're like, yes, here we go. But the whole of episode 13 waiting for him, see everyone in the building, think, okay, this is where he's going to pop out of a minigun out of nowhere.
I wanted to see him just mow down like all of the hand, just like Terminator 2 style. That would have been amazing.
And then he was there on the roof in a sniper, and don't get me wrong, it was cool. They kind of had that respect between him and Daredevil at that moment, which paid off their story arc. But what I feel,
like the T-Rex and the Velociraptor at the end of Jurassic World, just that nod, and then
a good version of that, I could say. I think what my theory's been the whole time is, I read a few months ago there were really heavy rumours. Netflix didn't confirm that Punisher had been so well received across the production rather than the post-production. They'd be giving him his own show. They've never confirmed this. Obviously, they wouldn't confirm it during production, but I feel like when they hit episode 10 or 11, they kind of told themselves that, okay, you'll get your Punisher show. And I felt they kind of cast away one or two of his subplots as such, and they kind of slowed him down, because you get the cool origin. He finally gets his costume.
That was great.
It looked great. And the downside of waiting 13 episodes to see him get that costume, again, they did that in Series 1, though. You waited for him to get the costume. So it's kind of ready for if Punisher's got his own show. And I felt like
no big reveal of the shirt, though, was there? You see him spray, and then he's standing there with the sniper, and you see it behind. But I was waiting for like wearing like to hold up the shirt, and the camera was going to zoom in on the skull or something.
Yeah. And I feel like they end his subplot too early, or they forget about him. They've even done this because he is getting this show. Maybe that's why they had to focus on the hand more or something else. It just felt very shoehorned, because the first half is all Punisher. The trial is so intriguing. The prison stuff for the Punisher is great. Him escaping is great. Then they set up, the people fake pretending to be Punisher, killing the DA, great. Then it just got to that last episode where I was like, oh, okay. You had that great moment of Punisher and Karen in the episode before, in episode 12, when she kind of walks away and she hears the gunshot of him killing the guy, and then it just felt like, okay, he stumbled into the room, he's now Punisher. I felt there's something missing, and I think that is because he's going to get a show, because he is the standout. And although they kind of wheezed past him in that last episode or two, he's still the best thing about season 2, and he is great. But I feel like they've planned more. They're just keeping on this line. I feel like they've done that during the production phase, where they might have had some last-minute writings or changes to do this. And it's great. And unless they did plan that, then okay, but it felt very last-minute.
Well, if they had stuff shot, like actual images and footage, then you can definitely tell they've cut bits out, which, I don't know, I think they should have put them back in. It would have made the finale episode really long, especially if you had more Punisher stuff, and maybe they wanted to focus on the hand stuff because that was the main narrative towards the end. But the biggest thing for me, we need to talk about the whole blacksmith storyline. So it sets it up immediately that he gets a name that's all tied into the death of his family, and it's the blacksmith, and it's thrown around here and there. So it's his quest to find this guy and put a bullet in his head basically. And he's finding people along the way who are saying they're the blacksmith, and they're not. And then ultimately it pans out that it's Clancy Brown's character with a really, really weak motivation. I don't think I can even remember his motivation. I think it's something to do that Punisher killed a soldier he really liked, like a loyal soldier. I think I may have missed it in the dialogue, but I remember him shooting him and thinking, well, that's not the blacksmith. Like, he's going to be someone setting up for his own series, maybe, who he goes after.
Yeah.
So here was me. I was Googling, like, who is the blacksmith? And then there was, like, all Marvel comics. And it says there's a character called the blacksmith in the comic books, but he's a good guy. And then it's like there's another character here who sometimes goes by the name of Blacksmith, but he's also a good guy. And then I was thinking, well, is it going to be like a literal blacksmith? Is it going to be the guy who's making Daredevil's costumes? Because he's always really kind of sketchy a little bit, and he keeps referring to Betsy, and you really don't know what's going on with him beyond that. But ultimately, it's Clancy Brown, and you know he's going to be a villain at some point, but I didn't expect him to be the end goal. And I don't even know if he's referred to as the blacksmith at the very end. He just sort of suddenly becomes bad. And then when you get that revelation, you sort of work backwards and think, well, why would he testify to try and get Frank Castle off the case? If he wanted him to be guilty and to get ultimately the death penalty, then just don't bother turning up to court, you know? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think there was a lot of wasted potential there because everyone else's storylines are tied up perfectly, whereas Frank Castle's is kind of left in the open because clearly they are going to do a solo thing with him. That was a weak point for me in the whole series, really. I don't think that paid off as nice as it should. But I did like the end shot where Punisher burns his house down and he kind of lets go of that part of his life and moves on to whatever is going to happen, whether that's going to be a movie or a series. I like where that end point left off, but before then, I don't know if there was such a good point of Punisher just suddenly showing up and helping Daredevil. I didn't quite get that progression back to that point because I think the point we see them before is where they're on the ship again talking about ideologies.
Yeah.
All of a sudden at the end he just shows up and saves Daredevil. So I don't know really if that was a satisfying way to finish the character, but it is what it is. If they cut it out, I don't know why. Maybe they're going to use that chunk in an episode, or it was a quick rewrite, like we don't want to take the character in this direction because we want to take him here. I don't know. So the finale, really, we get well, Karen knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil now. That was awesome. I thought it was leading there because when the trailer came out, I remember there was that shot where he's holding the top portion of the mask, and when he was reaching into the bag, I thought, okay, I know where this is going. But I loved that. I thought that was an awesome way to end it. I know technically the series ends on the shot with Elektra being alive again, but we've already talked about that. But I like where that's going to lead to now, because we've had this whole point where Foggy's only been the one who knows. So now is Karen going to be angry at Foggy because he never told her, and she's going to feel like she's been left out? She's clearly not going to be supportive of the idea, but maybe that's going to change her attitude towards Matt now. Now she knows the reason why he couldn't be with her.
Yeah, and again, I'll draw comparisons to Spider-Man 2. They're so different, but they're so similar. Where Mary Jane Watson finds out right at the end that he's Spider-Man. That's why he can't be with her. That's why, he's been different. And it's kind of, it's like the wake-up point for it. And in this, I feel the same way towards Daredevil, where you've been waiting and waiting for him to tell her, it's me. Then he finally does. And they do it well because it kind of just finishes there, which is, great. And for the future, I don't think they could go another few episodes without her knowing, because it would be getting into too much. And I want to see where they take it. You're right with the Foggy stuff. There has to be some conflict there. Should be questioning him. Now she's a journalist. She's going to say anything. I don't think she would, but there's an angle they could set up there. I like they've had to do that revelation. It made sense to do it at the finale rather than at the beginning of another season, because then you're going to have people waiting for it rather than they just do it out of nowhere, which makes sense. Going back to the Punisher quickly, you're right with the blacksmith stuff. It just kind of happened. And I know he had his former squad members in Afghanistan that he killed at the boat scene, which it just felt cheap and too obvious, especially when the guy clearly references him and he knows it's his old general or whatever it's going to be. It just felt shoehorned in, and again, that's purely because I think they're doing this Punisher show. But the Karen ending, they tied up that series arc well. I'm excited to see what they do next. I'm excited to see what they do next with Foggy. I'm intrigued to see what they do with Elektra, obviously Kingpin, Punisher. to be more of. So I think the way the season's finished is not setting up season 3 in a cheap way like how I meant to set up the Avengers, but they finished the story arcs very well, and they're naturally progressing into a 3rd season from these story arcs, rather than just say, okay, this is going to happen next year or next season.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I want to see a Series 3 before Defenders, but I'm sure they'll work it well. It just seems that if they do, it's like when you get Avengers, you get little aspects of each of the individual characters' backstories, but not a whole lot, like their personal lives. It's more just focused on the whole team aspect. So that's why I want to see a series first before we get to that, but we'll have to see what they do with it. We've kind of talked about where we think it's all going to lead to. We really don't know their schedule at this point. We know the series they want to make. It just depends how they're going to structure it all. I would love to see Daredevil somehow make it into the movies somewhere. You won't exactly be able to match the tone, but I guess you could have the character there if he's just fighting. It would be nice to see Infinity War Part 2 just throw everyone in there, like every character they've constructed at that moment, just to see. Because I can imagine the shot now, like we had that awesome one in Avengers where the camera pans around the whole team. Can you imagine just like a static shot of every single character in costume lined up? That would be amazing to see.
That's why with Civil War in the comic, there's this great moment where I don't think it happened in the film, but basically Spider-Man gets beat the shit into by someone or something. I can't remember it. But Frank Castle comes into Captain America, because at this point in the comics, I'm not talking about the films, this is comics, just in case people are listening. This isn't a spoiler for Civil War. Frank Castle's basically got Spider-Man's body. He's not dead, but he might as well be. Kicks down the door to Captain America's, like, not lair, but his team. He goes, you know, you need to help him. Then everyone's there like, Punisher, like, you can't be here. We can't have you. You're not one of us. Then he leaves. And I would love to see something like that in Civil War. Of course, it's not going to happen. But something so minor as that, just so he's been written in. And just like in Civil War, everyone from the comics is in Civil War, and I get you can't do that in the film, but it'd be really cool if they could reference the Marvel show at least. I bet you they'll reference Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something like that, but it'd be really cool to get a reference. But I do hope in Infinity War it does do it if Civil War doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to see them cross over it so much. I think I've talked about basically everything in this series. I think we both have. I think we've done well. We've covered everything. There's one thing I didn't mention really, really quickly. It was awesome to see Daredevil finally get the awesome baton with like the wire on it, the slingshot. That was great to see him finally get that now. He is absolutely Daredevil. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything else for us to say. I've said everything I want to. Have you said everything you want to on Series 2?
Watch it if you haven't.
Yeah, definitely. It's still a great series. I know we had some problems with it, but overall it is still great TV. Definitely worth watching if you're a Marvel fan, or even if you're not. It just does so well, just everything. It can get any new viewer on board with it, I think. So that'll do it for our very in-depth discussion on Daredevil Series 2. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this series. Let us know what you thought of Series 1, how the two compare. Did you like this one more? Because there's definitely a lot more going on in it. Whatever you like, please do drop us a comment. We've got a lot more reviews coming up. I know I need to do a 10 Cloverfield Lane review at some point. That's probably going to be a solo one. And then towards the end of April, we're going to have Civil War, which is probably the next big movie coming out. But do hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to keep updated with all of our reviews and reactions and everything that we bring out. And yeah, that'll do it for our video today. So until the next video, we'll see you next time.